A single dad, lost in grief, adopts a retired military dog broken by war. Both carry wounds no one can see, a father's silence, a dog's fear. When danger strikes, their bond is tested, and together they discover that even the deepest scars can lead to healing. The house had once been full of laughter. Photos on the wall still captured it. A smiling woman, a man holding her close, and a little girl with eyes full of sunlight. But now, those smiles felt like ghosts trapped behind glass. Ethan sat alone at the dinner table, the flicker of a single bulb casting long shadows across his face. In front of him lay an untouched plate of food. Across the table, his daughter Lila watched him quietly, waiting for him to speak. But he didn't. He never did. The only sounds were the ticking of the clock and the hum of the refrigerator, both reminders of time moving forward while their lives stood still. It had been a year since Ethan lost his wife Claire in a car accident. She was the warmth of their small family, the glue that held their days together. Since she was gone, Ethan worked long hours, spoke little, and buried his emotions under routine. Every corner of the house reminded him of her. The faint scent of her perfume on the curtains, her books stacked beside the bed, her laughter echoing faintly in his mind. Lila was the only thing keeping him anchored to this world, yet he couldn't bring himself to look into her eyes for too long. They looked too much like Claire's. Lila tried her best. Every morning she made 2 cups of coffee, one for her dad, one for herself, even though she didn't like coffee. She drew pictures of their family and placed them on the fridge, hoping he'd notice. Sometimes she talked to her mum's photo before bed, whispering, "Daddy doesn't laugh anymore. Can you help him?" She missed her mom, but more than anything, she missed her dad, the version of him that used to smile and chase her in the yard. Ethan noticed her efforts, even if he never said it out loud. There were moments, brief flickers, when guilt tugged at his heart, when he wanted to hug her and say, "I'm still here." But grief had built walls too tall for words to climb. Every attempt to show love reminded him of what he'd lost. So instead, he chose silence, believing it was strength. One evening, after tucking Lila into bed, Ethan sat on the porch, staring into the darkness. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the sound of distant barking. He thought about the emptiness in their home, how even the walls seemed tired. Maybe he thought they needed something alive again, something that could make Lila smile. A companion. Not for himself, but for her. He didn't know it yet, but that single thought would soon change everything inside the house. Lila's nightlight glowed softly, illuminating a crayon drawing pinned to the wall, a family of 3 holding hands, with a dog beside them wagging its tail. As Ethan closed his eyes, the drawing seemed to whisper a promise neither of them could yet understand. Healing sometimes begins when you open your heart to something broken too. The rain had not stopped for 2 days. Dark clouds hung low over the small town, and water ran down the sidewalks like tiny rivers. Ethan drove through the grey streets, his wipers struggling to keep up. In the back seat, Lila hugged her worn-out teddy bear, her chin resting on her knees. "Where are we going, Daddy?" she asked softly. Ethan glanced at her in the mirror. "Somewhere. Maybe to find a friend." It was the first sentence he'd spoken all morning. When they reached the local animal shelter, the smell of wet fur and disinfectant filled the air. Dogs barked from their cages, some eager, some afraid, some too tired to care. Lila's eyes lit up as she pressed her face against the glass of each enclosure, waving to every tail that wagged back. For a moment, Ethan saw a spark of joy on her face, and it made him realize how long it had been since she'd smiled like that. A shelter volunteer, an older woman with gentle eyes, noticed them. "Looking for a pet?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "For my daughter," he said. Lila jumped in. "I want one who needs a home the most." The woman smiled faintly and gestured toward the back corner. "There's one, but he's not easy." In that far corner lay an old German shepherd named Rex. His fur was dull, and his eyes, deep brown, cloudy with age, stared at the floor, as if the world no longer deserved his attention. His body flinched at every sound. His tail never moved. "He's a retired military dog," the woman explained quietly. "Served overseas, he lost his handler in combat. Since then he won't eat properly. Won't let anyone near him." Ethan stood still, staring at the trembling animal. The story hit too close to home. Loss, silence, pain that words couldn't fix. For a long moment, neither man nor dog moved. Then Rex looked up and their eyes met. It was like two broken mirrors reflecting the same cracks. Ethan knelt down slowly, saying nothing, just letting the dog see him. Rex didn't growl, he simply stared back, uncertain but curious. Lila tugged at Ethan's sleeve. "Can we take him, Daddy?" she whispered. The volunteer hesitated. "He's not like other dogs, sweetheart. He needs patience, trust, maybe more than most people can give." Ethan took a deep breath. "Maybe that's exactly what we need too." The adoption papers were signed in silence. As they stepped out into the drizzle, Rex followed behind, hesitant but obedient. The leash felt heavy in Ethan's hand, not from the dog's weight, but from the burden of what they were both carrying. Lila leaned down and whispered to Rex, "It's okay. We'll take care of you." The dog didn't respond, but for the first time in months, Ethan thought he saw something flicker in his daughter's eyes. Hope. As they drove home, the rain began to ease, and faint sunlight broke through the clouds. It wasn't much, but it was enough to see the road ahead, one filled with healing neither of them yet understood. The first few days after bringing Rex home were harder than Ethan expected. The old German shepherd refused to eat much, barely drank water, and growled whenever anyone came too close. He stayed in the far corner of the living room, eyes fixed on the door, as if waiting for someone who would never return. Leila tried everything, soft words, gentle hands, even reading storybooks aloud near him. But every time she took a step closer, Rex's low growl filled the silence, and she'd retreat, eyes watery, but still hopeful. Ethan told her to give. The dog time, though deep down he wasn't sure Rex would ever heal. Ethan saw too much of himself in that dog. The way Rex flinched at sudden noises reminded him of his own sleepless nights, waking from dreams of screeching tires and flashing headlights. The way the dog avoided touch mirrored Ethan's own fear of closeness. Both had lost something that had taken a part of their soul with it. Each morning, Ethan would stand by the window with his coffee, staring at Rex lying motionless on the rug, and wonder if they'd both ever feel whole again. Lila, however, refused to give up. "He's just scared," she'd say with childlike certainty. One afternoon, she placed a small bowl of chicken near Rex and sat a few feet away, drawing in her sketchbook. For a long while, Rex ignored it. But as evening settled, he crawled forward, sniffed the food, and took a bite. Lila didn't move or speak. She just smiled softly and kept coloring. It was a small moment, but when Ethan saw it, something warm flickered in his chest. Later that night, Ethan heard soft whimpers from the living room. He found Rex pacing, restless eyes darting around as if haunted by invisible ghosts. The dog's breathing was quick and panicked, his body shaking. Ethan froze, unsure at first, then slowly knelt down beside him. "It's okay," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I know what it's like." Rex turned his head toward him, ears twitching. For a few seconds, neither moved. Then Ethan, hesitating, reached out and gently placed a hand on Rex's back. The dog flinched, but didn't pull away. His trembling slowed. From that night onward, something changed. Subtle, fragile, but real. Ethan started taking Rex out for short walks in the yard, always keeping distance, but speaking softly, calmly. Lila watched from the porch, clapping when Rex finally wagged his tail just once. Each day, the silence in their home grew less heavy, replaced by the sound of footsteps, soft barks, and faint laughter. The walls that grief had built began to crack, brick by brick, and though Ethan didn't say it out loud, he began to understand something profound, that healing isn't about forgetting the pain, but finding someone who understands it. And so, Rex's cautious eyes, he saw reflection of his own scars, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel so alone. Morning sunlight spilled gently through the curtains, painting soft golden lines across the living room floor where Rex lay sleeping. His breathing was calmer now, no longer haunted by nightmares every night. Ethan sat quietly at the table, sipping his coffee, watching the old dog from a distance. For the first time since Claire's death, he felt something close to peace. Not joy, not yet, but the faint echo of it. The silence in the house had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It was calm, alive with quiet hope. Every day, Ethan began to follow a new routine. Before heading to work, he'd take Rex for short walks around the neighborhood. The first few times, Rex resisted, his ears twitching at every sound, his tail low. But Ethan spoke softly, using the same tone soldiers use to reassure each other under fire. Steady, grounded, patient. "Easy, buddy. You're safe here." Each word was more than just a command. It was a promise, one both of them needed to believe. At home, Lila joined in their new rhythm. She'd feed Rex treats from her small hands, sitting cross-legged on the floor while humming songs her mother used to sing. Rex, cautious but curious, began inching closer each day. One evening, as she placed a treat on her palm and whispered, "It's okay, boy," Rex sniffed her fingers, hesitated, then gently took the food. Lila's eyes widened, and she looked up at her father with a grin so bright that Ethan felt his throat tighten. "He trusts me, Daddy," she said softly. And Ethan realized in that moment that trust was the most fragile form of love, something earned slowly, with patience and kindness. Days turned into weeks, and the house began to feel like home again. Lila laughed freely now, often running through the backyard while Rex chased after her, his stiff legs moving faster than Ethan thought possible. The sound of their laughter and barking filled the air, echoes of life that had once been lost. Ethan found himself smiling without thinking, even laughing when Rex clumsily splashed through the sprinklers. Every small moment stitched something back together inside him. Ethan also began to heal through routine. Teaching Rex commands reminded him of the discipline and steadiness he had once admired in himself. Each sit, stay, or good boy wasn't just training the dog. It was rebuilding Ethan's sense of purpose. Late at night, when the world was quiet, Rex would lie near Ethan's chair, resting his head on his paws. Sometimes their eyes met, and it felt like two souls acknowledging each other's journey, both broken, both still trying. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lila sat between them on the porch, her small hands resting on Rex's fur. The golden light touched all three of them, a father, a daughter, and a dog, each carrying invisible scars, yet somehow lighter than before. Ethan looked at them and finally whispered, "We're going to be okay." For the first time, he truly believed it. The evening began like any other, quiet, peaceful, filled with the soft sounds of a home rediscovering life. Lila sat cross-legged on the floor, drawing pictures of Rex in her sketchbook, while the old dog lay beside her, his tail thumping lazily every few seconds. Ethan was in the kitchen, humming a tune under his breath as he cleaned the dishes, a small, ordinary moment that felt extraordinary after months of silence and sorrow. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of rain in the distance. After dinner, Lila yawned and kissed Rex on the nose. "Good night, hero," she said, giggling. Rex licked her cheek once, before curling up on his mat near her room. Ethan tucked his daughter in, smoothing her hair like Claire used to. As he switched off the light, she murmured sleepily, "Mum would be happy, Daddy." The words lingered in the air, warm and heavy, and Ethan whispered, "Yeah, sweetheart." And she would. Then he turned off the hallway lamp and sat on the porch for a while, staring at the stars. Sometime after midnight, the peace shattered. A faint crackling sound broke the stillness, followed by the sharp smell of smoke. Ethan woke to the sound of Rex barking, a deep, urgent bark that cut through the night. He rushed out of his room, eyes widening as orange light flickered down the hallway. The living room curtains were ablaze. The candle he'd forgotten to blow out had fallen. Flames climbed the walls like hungry shadows. "Lila!" he shouted, sprinting toward her room. But the fire was spreading fast, the heat pushing him back. Rex darted past him, barking wildly, ignoring Ethan's calls. The old dog vanished into the thick smoke, his silhouette disappearing down the corridor. Ethan grabbed a blanket and tried to follow, but the fire roared louder, forcing him outside for air. He coughed, eyes stinging, heart pounding as he shouted his daughter's name again. For a terrifying moment there was no answer. Then a sound, a bark, sharp and desperate, followed by a small voice crying out, "Daddy!" Through the flames, Ethan saw them. Rex leading Lila toward the front door, his fur singed, eyes glowing with fierce determination. He guided her through the smoke, nudging her towards safety. Ethan ran forward, grabbing Lila in his arms and pulling her out into the cool night air. He turned back immediately. Rex was lying by the door, panting heavily, his body trembling from exhaustion and burns. Ethan fell to his knees beside him, tears cutting through soot-stained cheeks. "You did it, buddy." "You saved her," he whispered, voice breaking. Rex's eyes met his, calm, loyal, at peace, before slowly closing. The firefighters arrived moments later, dousing the flames, pulling them away from the wreckage. Lila sobbed in Ethan's arms as he held her tightly, whispering, "It's okay, baby. He's a hero." That night, amid the ashes, Ethan realized something he had forgotten. Love isn't about holding on to the past. It's about what we're willing to risk to protect what's left. Weeks passed after the fire, but the memories of that night never faded. The house stood charred and hollow, blackened walls, broken frames, ashes where laughter once lived. Yet amidst the ruins there was life. Lila sat on the front steps of their temporary rental home, a small bandage still wrapped around her arm, sketching pictures of Rex in her notebook. Her drawings were filled with color, a brave dog with kind eyes, standing tall beside a smiling little girl. Every page whispered the same message: "He saved me. Rex survived, though barely." The veterinarians called him a miracle. His fur had burned in patches, his breathing slow, his movements weaker. But when Ethan visited him in the animal clinic, Rex's tail thumped weakly against the bed, his eyes lighting up the moment he saw his family. Ethan crouched beside him, gently resting a hand on the old dog's head. "You did good, soldier," he whispered, voice cracking. "You brought us back." It was more than gratitude. It was love, raw and unconditional, something Ethan hadn't allowed himself to feel since Claire's passing. As Rex healed, so did Ethan. The man who once hid behind grief now spent his days rebuilding, not just the house, but himself. He talked to Lila more, laughed easily, and began taking photos again, something he had abandoned long ago. Every picture captured moments of healing, Lila brushing Rex's fur, the three of them sitting under the afternoon sun, or simple breakfasts filled with quiet joy. The house that once felt like a grave of memories now pulsed with life again. One sunny morning, Ethan hung two framed photos side by side on the living room wall. One was of Claire, her smile radiant, eyes full of light. The other was of Rex, lying beside Lila in the backyard, both looking up at the sky. He stood back and smiled, a warmth spreading through his chest. It wasn't the same happiness he once knew. It was deeper, steadier, born from pain and forgiveness. Lila often sat beside Rex on the porch, reading stories aloud as he rested his head on her lap. "You know," she'd whisper, "Mom would have loved you." And in some way, she was right, because Rex had done what even time couldn't. He had mended the broken pieces of a father and daughter's world. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in gold and orange, Ethan joined them. Rex rested between them, his fur catching the last light of day. Ethan placed his arm around Lila and said softly, "You remember what Mom used to say? That love never leaves, it just changes shape." Lila nodded, smiling through teary eyes. "Yeah, Daddy, I think it changed into him." Ethan looked at Rex and smiled, eyes glistening. Maybe it did. As the night settled, the three of them sat together, a father, a daughter, and a dog who had once lost everything, now whole again. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful, healing, because sometimes love doesn't return the way we expect. Sometimes it comes back on four legs, carrying a scarred heart that teaches us how to live again. If this story touched your heart, remember, Healing begins when we care, even when we're hurting. Like, share and subscribe to Drew Daily Stories for more emotional tales of love, loss, and hope. Because every day, a story can heal someone.